The Democrats' racism scandal in Virginia has rightly focused on the offensiveness of blackface. But the blackface issue, literally and politically, is superficial. We need a deeper conversation. I've always despised racism. One of the things I'm most proud of in my professional life is an anti-racism campaign I helped create back in the UK. Obviously, I'm white. Even though I grew up in a working-class family of new immigrants from Hungary, I never suffered race-based discrimination. But I've always felt a bit of an outsider, perhaps with some empathy for victims of actual discrimination. When I moved here 7 years ago, my attitude to race was shaped by that British experience of fighting current discrimination. Then I saw the depth of the anger and mistrust here, the intensity around identity and past oppression. Why are they still going on about it? What's this all about, I thought. So I tried to understand it. I educated myself. I asked questions. I read the history. And that changed my attitude. Let me put it this way. A huge part of my political philosophy, my hatred of government control and authoritarianism, comes from what the communists did to my family in Hungary. That was nothing compared to slavery. But I understand how anger about things that were done generations ago can shape someone's beliefs today. There's another perspective I want to bring to all this, the populist perspective. Populism, the positive kind, is about putting power in people's hands. Political power, so their voices are heard, but crucially, economic power too, so they can choose the life they want to lead. For a while, I've wanted to say what I think about race in America, as an immigrant, as an outsider, and as a believer in positive populism. I know that what I'm going to say will be controversial, but I want you to listen with an open mind. Race shouldn't be a left-right issue, but it often feels like that. Liberals can offend conservatives with strident identity politics. Conservatives can offend liberals by making race all about character. If only African Americans tried harder, worked harder. Of course, character matters. Behavior matters, and family most of all. But many of the barriers African Americans face today are uniquely the result of discriminatory policy, from slavery to Jim Crow to the New Deal even. The biggest is wealth inequality. The wealth of middle-class America was massively boosted by policies like the GI Bill, which paid for college education, and other policies to spread home ownership. These excluded black Americans by design. The federal government subsidized around $120 billion in home loans between 1934 and 1962 through the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Housing Administration. 98% of those loans went to white families. Today, around two-thirds of middle-class wealth is held in home ownership. So unsurprisingly, white families are disproportionately wealthier than black ones. How much wealthier? 86 times. According to the Census Bureau, for every $100 the average white family has, the average black family has $7.33. But it's not just accumulated wealth, it's current earnings too. At every level of income, African Americans earn less. The truth is self-evident. The persistent poverty and blocked opportunity of African Americans is structural and specific. It is the result of policy and practice in areas like housing, education, criminal justice, and more. We will never, never, never achieve racial harmony in this country until we acknowledge these truths as the first step in a process of national reconciliation. I use all those words deliberately. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in post-apartheid South Africa, the First Step Act, developed by both parties here, passed by Congress, championed by President Trump. But now we need many more steps. We need a truth and reconciliation process here. And it should explicitly consider dramatic action to close the wealth and opportunity gap. Not just a pledge to avoid discrimination, but reparation for the cruelty of the past. Not handing out checks, but asset reparations, loans to buy homes and start businesses, community banking and credit unions to free African Americans from the traps of debt and predatory lenders, asset reparations. Of course, There are policies like school choice and support for families that we should want for every American, but which can help African Americans even more. But this wealth inequality, the direct result of past discrimination, that needs special attention. A truth and reconciliation process with due consideration of asset reparations, that is the only way to heal our racial divide. The Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, and now the party of Trump, as it showed with the First Step Act, can take the lead. I hope it does. Tell me what you think of that at NextRevFNC.
Virginia Governor Ralph Northam seemed on the verge of resigning just days ago for wearing blackface 35 years ago. But the media narrative changed when a professor named Vanessa Tyson accused Northam's potential successor, Justin Fairfax, of forcing her to perform oral sex after some consensual kissing in 2004. And he slammed her.
And so this person then went into hiding and laid low in the weeds. And then the second that this issue popped up here in Virginia, and there's a lot of media attention, crops back up with the same false allegation and uses others to get it out into the mainstream and the media.
Tyson said it's been extremely difficult to relive that traumatic experience from 2004. Mr. Fairfax has tried to brand me as a liar to a national audience in service to his political ambitions. Now, a second woman, Meredith Watson, is charging that Fairfax was premeditated and aggressive in raping her at a Duke fraternity house in 2000. And Lieutenant Governor is also accusing her of a smear. He softened his tone a little bit lately. But news organizations are gathering corroborating evidence. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. Jillian Turner, a Fox News correspondent and former White House national security official. And Mo Alithi, former Democratic Party official and a Fox News contributor who runs Georgetown University's Institute of Politics. Molly, with two accusers now saying that Justin Fairfax sexually assaulted them, or raped them in the early 2000s. Do you see a difference between this coverage and the way the media handled the allegations from 35 years ago against Brett Kavanaugh during those Supreme Court hearings?
Yeah, in many ways, this is a sad story in its substance, and there's a lot that will have to be recorded. From a media angle, I think the Washington Post comes out looking very poorly. They say they didn't run with the Justin Fairfax story, even though they had this information about him last year, because they didn't have enough to go on. When in fact, you have a person who's making an allegation with a specific time and date, and he concedes that there was a sexual encounter between the two. It doesn't seem like they ran that story down hard. But having said that, that's fine if they didn't run it. But then to run the Brett Kavanaugh allegations when there was no corroboration for any of that, and you didn't even have the specifics of a date, a location, a year, you didn't have any corroborating evidence, that makes the Washington Post look bad, and it makes it look like they are willing to go with allegations for political reasons.
Although the Post has continued to do some reporting on these current allegations against Justin Fairfax. Jillian, we have Vanessa Tyson, we have Meredith Watson. The New York Times and the Washington Post in recent days have been able to interview, on the record, friends they told about these alleged assaults in the past, either verbally or by email. So isn't that, when you get into these he said, she said situations, isn't that important corroboration by the press?
That's everything. And that's the standard that has been the gold standard for many, many years. If you have people that are willing to go on the record, or people that are willing to speak to you on background or on the record, that's everything. When there's no one who's coming forward to corroborate any of the stories, as was the case with Brett Kavanaugh, that creates tension and difficulty, as well it should.
Many big-name Democrats, including in Virginia, are urging Justin Fairfax to resign. The two women say they'll cooperate with authorities or impeachment. Meredith Watson, for example, there's no statute of limitations in North Carolina where the alleged attack took place. But liberal anchors and journalists, I must say, with a few exceptions, have just sort of reported the facts without comment or said, we don't know what happened. Far different than in the Kavanaugh case.
A lot of the folks I have seen, it is really interesting. In both the Northam case with the blackface and the allegations against Fairfax, it's really interesting to see sort of the unanimity of folks condemning and calling on their resignations, saying that they should step down, or at least positing that their political situation might be untenable.
I think there's been much more of it with Northam and the blackface than
I think absolutely with that, and I think with the second allegation with Fairfax, that's when the dam sort of broke. What's really interesting to me is, and I came up through Virginia politics. I worked there for about a dozen years, and I called on both gentleman to step down. What's really fascinating is the apparent disconnect between all of us, the pundit class, the political class, the media class, and voters. The Washington Post just came out with a poll last night or this morning that shows voters, or at least as it comes to Northam, evenly split.
Like 47,
but nearly 60% of black Virginians urging the governor to remain or saying he should remain. And to me, that is a really fascinating disconnect between how we're all talking about it and how Virginians are thinking about it.
Some conservative commentators saying, well, Justin Fairfax deserves due process despite the seriousness of the allegations. Look, Lieutenant Governor says he's being smeared by both of these women. So what possible incentive do these two women have to come forward to put themselves in this line? They're not suing, they're not asking for money, they're not going on TV.
Well, it is true that in the case of at least one of the accuser, the fact that she's in the same political party as the person she's accusing should mean something. It's also true that people come forward with stories for any number of reasons, and due process means that you do believe someone is innocent until they are proven guilty. Having someone who seems credible or having someone who seems sympathetic is not the same as actually meeting that standard. And it is important for the country to remember that allegations are easy to make, actually, and that proving them is much more difficult. But just to the larger point, too, of the media coverage, you don't have to work that hard to imagine what would be happening if the three top people in a state's government were Republican and going through a KKK photo scandal, credible allegations of rape and a blackface scandal. These are all happening. You would see protests, you would see narratives, you would say, what's wrong with the Republican Party and why is this happening? The coverage of Virginia seems to treat it as if it's just very localized, as if there's just like Virginia is a weird place. You're not seeing those national discussions about what is the Democratic Party's problem with race and sex and power.
I think the media coverage, though, when it comes to maybe not the rape accusations, but when it comes to the blackface and KKK photos, the media, I think, overall this week played a positive role in moving that story forward in the sense that without the media coverage, when media coverage, it kind of broke the tidal wave of the political class coming forward and calling for resignation.
That might be true. The point being that that is not something that you get when it's a Republican involved in this type of scandal. And that's the type of privilege accorded to Democrats that you don't see for Republicans.
I agree with that. I mean, I've received so many, every major national media outlet in the country sent reporters down to Richmond. The number of them that called me at my office to say, what is going on with the Virginia Democratic Party? Is it imploding? I mean, I think when it comes to issues of race and issues of sexual assault, both parties have now had to deal with some very, very difficult conversations, and that the national media has played a very large role in opening up these conversations and picking at some scabs that were barely covering some deep wounds.
Justin Fairfax looked like he was on the verge of becoming governor, and these accusations came out. There were all of these anchors and commentators, including liberal commentators, demanding that Ralph Northam resign over his admitted use of blackface impersonating Michael Jackson. There's a dispute about whether or not he was him in the yearbook photo, another racist photo. Then we learned that the state attorney general, Mark Herring, second in line to the governorship, also admitted doing blackface back in 1980. As despicable and as offensive as those blackface images are the media in some ways imposing retroactively the standards of 2019 on stuff that happened decades ago?
I think all of us are grappling with how to handle some of these situations right now. And the entire Democratic establishment, both in Virginia and nationally, have called on Northam and Fairfax to resign. But you see now Virginians saying, let's maybe not go that far. Black Virginians seem to be more open to forgiveness than a lot of us in this town are. And so I do think, I agree with Jillian, that the media has played a huge role in furthering a conversation about not just race and sexual assault, but conversations about redemption, about have we gone, are we digging too deep at times? What is appropriate and what is not? And I don't think anybody has the real answers.
I just want to make the quick point that in both of these cases, Justin Fairfax says, yes, he had sex with these women, but he claims it was consensual. So obviously there was some basis for believing it. The media seem like consumed now by these allegations of what politicians and office holders did 15 years ago, 25 years ago, 35 years ago. Are we just at a zero tolerance level for anything?
Well, this is a kind of weird standard. We used to say that what you did in high school or college, we kind of had an understanding about it. What makes it particularly weird in this case is this entire controversy got started because of something that's happening right now, which is that the governor advocated for this radical late-term abortion bill and even said that he supported the killing of children after they're born. That's a scandal happening right now that relates to policy right now. And so to move the conversation away from this issue of having a governor who supports this barbaric practice and changing it to a conversation about what happened 35 years ago, it's good to have that conversation, but you shouldn't leave the policy items that are in play right now
That
on the
actually
table.
led to the current blackface scandal because of sources who did not like the governor's stance
And they
on
released
late-term
the photo
abortion,
because of that.
getting the yearbook. But let me ask you this. So Northam now makes clear, here's an interview in the Washington Post today, lead story. Northam vows a focus on race. Says he's not going to resign because obviously the two people behind him in succession have problems. He did an interview with CBS's Gayle King, part of which aired this morning, an African-American, saying he wants to devote the rest of his term to dealing with issues of racial equity and other race-related matters. So is this media offensive going to help him, even though the Post editorial page and the Richmond Times-Dispatch editorial page say he should go?
I mean, that's a nice idea that he has there, you know, and I hope that he has some success with it. The problem is that the tidal wave has already, you know, washed everything ashore here. Like I said earlier, I think large part in response to the media's like really overwhelming coverage of this issue. What we're watching here is everybody grappling with the question of, well, is there a statute of limitations on bad behavior? And because there's no answer in the law, everybody's turning to the media to see what pundits and journalists have to say about it.
The media grappling with it as well.